Hi, I'm Helena. So, we have a lot we have to talk about today. Not only the content I wanted to make or the content I will make, but also like what we're gonna do within the next weeks and what I plan to do. Um, so, let's start out with thank you so much for watching me rant 1 hour about Snow White or talk about it 1 hour because honestly, like the most reviews were much worse than what I said. So thank you so much for watching, even though I don't think that many of you have actually watched the whole thing because there were like no comments saying she's 7 or it's her mother or I don't know. My mother would never do this, or even worse, my mother would do this, or something like that. So I did not get any comments about this. So probably no one of you has actually watched the whole thing, which is totally fine. By the way, I'm just kind of creeped out that 30 people watched this, which is so weird. I don't know, but you give me so much of your time, so thank you very much. Um, so what we're gonna do within the next weeks. So you might have already maybe noticed, or maybe it has been in like the videos I didn't upload, that I'm personally a Wagnerian. So basically I love musical theater, not only like musicals, but also opera. So Richard Wagner is a great German composer, but he did not really use the word opera for all of his works, but just from the 10 grand ones, just the first 3 were called opera. So within the next 10 weeks, I would like to introduce you to the 10 great ones. And by introduce you, I mean like not playing any music or something, but just me telling you the story of the work. Because I don't have a better word, because as I said, he did not use the word opera after his exile. Anyway, so this is what we're gonna do within the next 10 weeks. I'm gonna have one every week, which I'll talk about. Alongside this, I wanted to be very, very niche and just talk about basically any series. So I might have told you that I'm not like a Disney kid. Like I just found Disney when I was much older than like most people. So in my teens or something. So I'm currently watching like a lot of Disney shows on Disney Plus, which is really weird kind of because when I was a child I don't know, I saw 1 or 2 episodes of each thing and then like nothing. So it's really weird now to see the whole thing. But anyway, I wanna introduce you kind of to what I grew up with or what I found the best series, or just what helped me in growing up. And I'm totally losing my thread. Anyway, so just for example, like the Addams Family, the original series, or Bewitched, or I don't know, the Golden Girls, or now Hot in Cleveland, which is basically the spin-off of Golden Girls. Like it's the same concept, but just in a modern way, and just stuff like this. And of course, Downton Abbey. I say of course because my room's basically Downton Abbey themed, so I see like all the pictures in here, and you don't obviously, and this is one of the reasons why I'm always in front of this backdrop, because I'm kind of a bit embarrassed, like having Lord and Lady Merton up my wall and stuff like this. Anyway, so this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna have 10 weeks of a Wagnerian piece each week and a series each week. So if you like want to have a specific series coming up, or like for me to talk about a specific series if I have seen it, if I have seen it. I don't like watch the most mainstream stuff, like, I don't know, Game of Thrones. I have watched it, I began it, and then the 8th season came out, and I was like, no. And I was in the middle of the series, by the way. And I heard like all this bad talk about it, so I thought like, no. Also, we're getting back to Wagner. Game of Thrones is actually like based on 4 Wagnerian pieces, which is called The Ring of the Nibelung, which will be week 6, 7, 8, and 9. So there we're gonna maybe meet a few people you might know from Game of Thrones, such as Brienne or Cersei or Jaime. Just saying. Or also, I don't know, maybe a Death of the Ring was featured like very prominently in the 1st or 2nd season. So we could get to that. Anyway, so if you've got like any wishes or something, then please write down to me in the comments. And if you've really watched the whole thing of Snow White, which is again really weird that so many people watch this. But anyway, so also you might see that I've got this, and I basically look like Lydia from Beetlejuice, which is also something we could do, like talk about musicals. But I thought I've got so many lipsticks, and I kind of wanted to see them on screen. Wanted to see what they look like if I get photographed, or if I should just throw them out. So this one is Smoked Saffron. I got glasses and can't see. Smoked Saffron number 285 from Maybelline, New York. So I don't know, I kind of look like a goth kid. Not sure about this one. So I just remembered something I wanted to tell you. Oh yeah. Also, like, parallel to all this, if I've got something coming up, like an event or something, then I'm of course gonna like show you to get ready with me, or what I'm doing at this outing show, whatever specifically. So for example, this weekend I've got something, which of course I'm gonna vlog, and it's probably gonna be really embarrassing to vlog in public, but well, yeah. So whenever I got something like this coming up, it's of course also gonna get posted, and as I promised you, I'm gonna be very niche, and I'm gonna take you to all the Bavarian castles. Not all the Bavarian castles, oh god, but big ones, like the ones that I've told you from, that were built in the 19th century by our dear King Ludwig II. So basically, like Neuschwanstein, of course, you probably know this. This is the one castle they are already talking about, and it's in Bejeweled, I think, etc. This is one. Then we have the Bavarian version of Versailles, which is, by the way, more expensive than Versailles, and with much more gold and much more detail than Versailles, which is on an island, because our dear king did not want to mingle too much with the population, so he like kept himself away from most people. And the third one is called Linderhof, which is like this French vacation palace, kind of. It's very little, but it's got a great, beautiful, wonderful park with a lot of influence also from Wagner. I don't know, I say Wagner so much, and it's not gonna get better when we get to the main point of this video. And so that's where we're gonna go. That's actually kind of my favorite, because it's the only one that's finished. And we've also got like the typical Wittelsbach castle here in Munich, which is called Nymphenburg. This is also like the same part of the village where I was born. So I was born kind of, I don't know, a kilometer away from the palace. And there's also the Gallery of the Beauties. So basically, King Ludwig I, not the second, the first, he had a great eye for beauty. So he had this gallery where he had the most beautiful women of his time painted. And so there's, I don't want to say a number because I'm going to be horribly wrong, and they're building a house next door, so I'm just getting this thump in my ear and I'm completely thrown off my path. Anyway, so he's got the most beautiful women of his time basically in this gallery of beauties, and I might, if I'm allowed to film in there, because I know that in most castles obviously you can't, like there are virtual see-throughs or something, or run-throughs, like of Neuschwanstein, for example, which you can go through via the internet. But this is really throwing me off. I'm so sorry. I thought this was over. Anyway, but I think in Nymphenburg you can actually film, so I can show you around, like say who's maybe not considered to be beautiful from today's standard and who I think is the most beautiful, and you can tell me who you think is the most beautiful. So yeah, this king, by the way, also like left the throne because he fell in love with an actress, Lola Montez. Anyway, this is so awkward, this heavily thumping. I really hope you don't hear this. Probably if you're a headphone user you might actually hear it, and I'm so sorry for this, but I can't like cancel this right now. Anyway, next thing, what I actually want to talk about after 12 minutes of an introduction is the musical I've been in like a few weeks ago. So if you've seen my Get Ready With Me videos, then you might already know a few things about this musical and why it has such a connection to my family. But we're gonna talk about it like in greater detail after I've seen it, which is now. So let's start off. This musical, we're gonna have three parts of this. So first we're gonna talk about costumes and like the stage settings and all. Then we're gonna talk about the music, and then we're gonna talk about the story. And in the very end, please, I'm gonna tell you that if you may get triggered by, let's say, early 20th century, yes, early 20th century German history, which I know we all know because we all know about the Second World War. If you get triggered by that, then please shut off. And I'm gonna tell you this, and please do, because there is a few things in the musical when I'm gonna talk about like the historical stuff, which happened later, of course, because the musical is not about everyone in detail, but just about a specific framing and not what happened after, let's say. And there is a point that's gonna go into anti-Semitism, unfortunately, which I hate really much, and like historical anti-Semitism and Hitler and stuff. So please, if you get triggered by that, then I'll tell you to just shut off. This is basically why I'm refilming this video, because I didn't like give you a trigger warning and I was suddenly completely like in the storyline with Hitler, and this was really weird, and I was like, no, you probably don't want to see that, and that's okay, by the way. So we're gonna start off with the settings. So basically I told you this was concert-like. So they have a place for the orchestra, as they have in most operas and most festival houses or something. But in this case the orchestra was on stage, which at the same time means that the round turnable stage for which this theater is so famous, it's the largest turnable stage in Europe, was not usable because the orchestra sat on it, and they would have had to spin the orchestra along. So this was kind of unfortunate because it took away a lot of things, and also there was not like a scenery very much. There were like the original drawings that I think, please don't quote me on this. I think it was Madame Barberino, who was also the architect of the house. It was her sketches that were like projected on the back of the theater. So we had kind of a knowledge where we were, but like not this great scenery my parents talked about, which was very detailed and very wonderfully painted and stuff, which is basically, I'm going to draw a parallel to the Sleeping Beauty of the Royal Opera House slash the Royal Ballet specifically. So it was painted like this. It was really beautiful. We did not get any of this because obviously they lost all their money and probably everything was sold. The thumping's getting louder every second. Anyway, so this was, I mean, unfortunate, but it's only for 3 days. So I understand that they won't make this great of an effort, basically. So the second thing is the costumes. So they basically use the same costumes they did when they do the regular King Ludwig II musical. And yes, it's mostly crinolines. And I don't know the English word for that, unfortunately. So it's like hoop skirts, that's it. So they were mostly in hoop skirts. Unfortunately, and this is where I'm kind of triggered in a way, because obviously it's a specific time period, so we have specific costumes, but these weren't all specific. There was a lot of like Jane Austen-like costumes, like from the earlier 19th century, like from the beginning of the 19th century basically. So this was mixed with the hoop skirts, and I don't know, maybe they don't have enough of the hoop skirt costumes because they look like they're really expensive and they just wanted to use like the stuff they have. Again, it's only for 3 days. So yeah, it's kind of a bit unfortunate, if I may say so myself, because it kind of ruined the vibe a bit. Like the different periods of costumes looked a bit weird. Anyway, the music made up for everything because the music is so beautiful. It's composed in the Wagnerian way. I told you he's gonna come up a lot. Love him as a composer, hate him as a man, but still composed beautifully, as I said. So it was really beautiful to listen to these melodies and to listen to what was going on. Also the composer, I think of this one, said that it should sound to the people going into it like Wagner sounded to people of the 19th century. So this was extremely beautiful. But now we get to, again, the unfortunate point, because I don't know if I have told you, I don't think so, might be in the Get Ready With Me video, but this house is constructed in a very, very specific way. It was made in the same way that the festival house in Bayreuth is made. So basically, the orchestra, normally in an opera, here's the stage, here's the orchestra. Okay, totally fine. This is a bit different in the Wagnerian houses, or houses that were built after Wagnerian ideas, because the orchestra in this case is partly below the stage. So you got the stage and the orchestra is partly below, and then the wall between the audience and the orchestra slash the stage is curved. So you kind of have this curve that also is a tiny bit onto the stage. So the stage is like here and the curve is a bit more up, basically. So this has the result that it has the best acoustic in the world, Basically, the orchestra plays under the stage, partly under the stage. The sound goes up, goes in the rounded wall, comes up on the stage, mingles with the voices of the artists, of the singers, and then it goes out to the audience. This is the original plan, and it's made specifically for 19th centuries in which microphones were not a thing. Let's be very real, microphones were not a thing in the 19th century. So now you're having a piece where the orchestra is on stage and they have microphones, and I think even like the orchestra has microphones, some of them. So it kind of completely destroyed the acoustic in the first part. They fixed it in the second part, but in the first part it was very hard to like understand a few things that were said, which was really sad, honestly, because obviously I had heard it most of it before, because there's the highlights on YouTube Music. So I love the music basically, but it was a bit unrecognizable at times due to this misuse of the phenomenal acoustic. Which is again really sad. Why don't you use this? Obviously they wanted to have a concert-like statement. Anyway, so again, music was beautiful. The singers were absolutely brilliant. There was maybe a bit with like the singer, I'm gonna sound so mean, I'm sorry, with the singer of the Empress Elisabeth of Austria, which you might know as Sisi, or as Sissi or something. If you have ever been in Vienna, you know her. So she was a bit too vibrato-esque for my personal taste, because that's not something you normally use at Wagnerian music, because it's very straightforward, and it's actually one of the composers where you don't need this extreme it's almost a bit too much for this than like just singing it straight, like na 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 na. So and I tuned it down a lot, like, okay, I'm probably gonna get copyrighted anyway. So that was a bit too much, but anyone else was absolutely brilliant. And to be clear, Elisabeth was also brilliant, just was a bit too much for my personal taste. Just saying. Okay. Everyone else was simply great. My personal favorite was, and we're gonna get to this later when we like get into the persona, the persons who were on stage, but my favorite was called Sophie, and was actually the little sister of the Empress of Austria, and she was absolutely brilliant. She had such a fabulous voice, and she had a hoop skirt, by the way. She had such a fabulous voice, and she also at one point sang a very classical piece by Jacques Offenbach. She sang it completely false, and it takes so much in you to sing something completely off key, and she did that. And immediately after, she like had her own song or her own duet, and then she sang perfectly. So this was really fun, seeing her, and she was absolutely talented, and she was really great, my opinion, personally. I think I know her like from the other musical, but I'm not sure. Anyway, so this, I think, Barcarolle, by the way, is called the piece by Jacques Offenbach that she basically butchered. Anyway, now let's get to the story. So basically there were 4 storylines, which was of course the king, then it was Sophie and her photographer, then it was the ministers, basically, or the secretaries if you're American, and there was my favorite, which is about Richard Wagner, because Ludwig was a great fan of Richard Wagner. He had a great musical taste, as unfortunately had other persons in the history, but never mind. So there were these 4 storylines, and unfortunately, and I say really, really big unfortunately, it was just scenes of the original musical. I don't think this was the whole. I know for a fact that like 1 or 2 songs of the highlights on YouTube Music were left out, but I think there was stuff that just didn't get in, and without the scenery and stuff, it wasn't really clear when the king was dreaming and when he was awake. So this was again a bit unfortunate, because at times it wasn't clear whether he was dreaming or whether he was awake, which of course honestly could also be a thing, because why not? Maybe they wanted to say, okay, you're not able to keep reality from dreaming, neither did he. So maybe this was kind of part of the plan. If so, I don't know. Didn't know they missed. Don't want to say they missed the mark, because they didn't. But I don't know, that the story was not as clear as it maybe could have been with scenery and all. And obviously, we all knew this was coming / not coming. Was that the horse's carriage was not a thing on stage, because also they would have had to turn the stage so that the horses would not have clapped off, so to say, immediately, and they couldn't turn because the orchestra sat on it. So this was unfortunately not a thing, but they like had any sort of device or instrument with which they clapped on stage, so that it sounded like there were horses on stage. Also, this was, and this is my favorite song out of the whole album, so maybe if you like listen to one, then this one is called Singleballade, which is basically the same thing in English, single ballad, and you should find it if you like look on Spotify or if you look on YouTube Music. I'm gonna try to also again link this in the description below, so you can listen a bit to it if you want. And if you like listen to one thing, then it should be this. I'm kind of conflicted because there are so many beautiful, but this is my favorite anyway. So no horses on stage, unfortunately, no carriage on stage, not that many props, but of course again it's concerts like situation, and I don't know whether this will get picked up. I got like an email a few days later when they were like, would you comment on what you thought of the musical? And there was like, yeah, which characters did you find the best? Not what music did you find the best? What did you think of the costumes? What did you think of this? And like a large, what did you think generally? And I like wrote a paragraph basically about this, and this thumping is really getting on my nerves by now. I don't know. They're building this house and I'm constantly having headaches. This is so unnerving. Anyway, so maybe it's gonna get picked up. I hope so. Like, maybe not in this concert version, but with proper stuff. Because there were also a few like questionable things going on, let's say. For example, at one point, and we're gonna get to this when we getting to Siegfried, which is the 8th part of a Wagnerian series. There's Siegfried in the original fighting with a dragon-like creature, something between a dragon and a snake. It's called a Lindwurm. So he's fighting with this in the Wagnerian original. So they kind of did this on the stage and with a Siegfried and a Tyrannosaurus Rex. And just to be very clear about this, a Tyrannosaurus Rex, which is kind of, didn't you have like some kind of snake behind the stage? Come on, there's gotta be something that's better to represent a snake / dragon than a Tyrannosaurus Rex. And like everyone in the audience like laughed a bit. It was looked a bit absurd, let's say it like this. Anyway, so I hope this will like get picked up properly. But let's go on with the storyline. So as I said, the Ludwig storyline was maybe a bit unclear, but this might have been on purpose. But I couldn't always say like if it was dream or if it was reality. So the second one is like his ministers slash secretaries, depending on where you're from. For us it's ministers, and they were like constantly saying, oh, he's spending too much money, he shouldn't build this, he shouldn't build that, we should be at war, we should fight against Prussia, we should, by the way, Prussia is today not a thing anymore, but it's a very commonly used slur, kind of almost, by Bavarians. So if you wanna I don't know, curse at somebody, just call him a Prussian, and every Bavarian will love you for it, basically. So, or a Preis. If you're in Germany, say Preis. This is everything. So they wanted to go to war against Prussia, and this and that and this and that, and they kind of hated the idea that they had this very artsy monarch who was in his own world, who loved music, who loved opera and Wagnerian works, you know, and who had like this also fascination of Eastern cultures, which we're gonna see when we get to Linderhof, because he has like little houses from, for example, Morocco, or that were built after houses found in Morocco. So he was very East and South, basically. He loved these cultures. Anyway, basically they were not on his side by any means, and this was made very clear throughout the musical. And at one point, which was very funny, but I don't know whether it's historically accurate, they were like, oh, now he wants to build this tower in Munich. We're so against it, we don't want to fund this, we're not gonna spend money on this. Like, this French guy, this Monsieur Eiffel, he can stay where he wants with his tower, which is, I don't know whether this is actually a thing historically, that the Eiffel Tower, or what not was supposed to be, but that there was ever a thought that the Eiffel Tower could be in Munich. I think it's very funny to think about, but I don't know whether that's true or not. But it's a funny thought, so why not? So these were the ministers. They were kind of always getting down, and they wanted to imprison him because he was mad, which, I mean, maybe he was. He also smoked cannabis, so, which is also, by the way, an extra song, and I thought they were gonna cut that out, but they didn't, which was very funny. Anyway, so this was the second storyline. Now we get to the interesting storylines. So one of them is of Sophie. She was, for a very short time, she was engaged to the king, but she fell in love with someone else, with a common photographer, like, as they said, not with blue blood like the royals, but with red blood, basically, a commoner. So the basic storyline of them was they were madly in love with each other. It was like a misunderstanding that she was engaged to the king because they were found in kind of a compromising position, which was just like a hug or something. But we know 19th century hugs, that's a marriage vow, basically. You should never hug someone in the 19th century because it's either like an extramarital affair or it's basically a marriage vow. So this was kind of their story. They weren't supposed to be engaged. She wanted to marry her photographer, and then she kind of set the king off by singing this barcarolle so wrong, so in the wrong key and against the music. It was really horrible to listen to. And she did it so confidently. This was really fun. So then, like, the king broke the engagement. Now the thumping's gone, and now I'm all again completely thrown off train. Anyway, so, and the king ended the engagement basically because he said, I can't be with someone who disregards music so much. This is not gonna happen. So kind of the end of their story in the musical, say in the musical because later we're gonna get to like the historical points, was her going off through the audience with her photographer, and they were like singing of love and it was so beautiful. And unfortunately I googled it later and was not at all what happened. Which is of course unfortunate. So next thing is like my favorite story. We're gonna get there. Richard Wagner. So basically, the problem is I know so much about this story that I can't exactly say what's in the musical and what not. So if I like get confused a few things, then I'm really sorry. I hope you're gonna be able to like watch it on your own. But so let's start. Basically, the King Ludwig is called a fairy tale king in Bavaria because he loved the old Germanic fairy tales, such as Tristan and Isolde, which was of course then later turned into a musical work by Richard Wagner and stuff like this. By the way, in Tristan and Isolde is also part of the original Snow White, because Isolde says she has a headache and wants her maid Brangäne to go to the woods and find her some herbs or something, and she sends some huntsmen with her so they kill her. Just keep that in mind. But anyway, Ludwig was called the fairy tale king because of his deep love to these Germanic fairy tales, and because like Wagner had similar love, and because he musicalized a lot of these, they were connected on another level, kind of. So basically at the time the musical begins, or at the time that Ludwig was crowned king when he was only 18 years old, at this time Wagner was in exile because he was part of the German Revolution in 1848. So he had to flee Germany. He had a very good friend in Hans von Bülow was his name, who like wrote the piano selection, kind of, not selection, but the piano score for all of Wagner's works, and who also just give me a second to think of that word. I don't think it's director. 1 second. I'm gonna look this up. You know what the most horrible thing is? The most horrible thing is I thought I didn't have to write this down again, because last week when I recorded this originally, it came to mind. So it's conductor. So Hans von Bülow wrote like the piano scores for all of Wagner's works and conducted at this point in time only opere. So the first three. So the third one, which is called Lohengrin, was the one that Ludwig really fell in love with. And because of that, Ludwig like sent people out to find Wagner, who like fled all over Europe because he was in debt in every single country, because he hardly worked, because he said he couldn't write music at the moment because he had to flee or something, and he could only like have satin on his body, which was really expensive. And as he didn't work and had high expenses, he was in debt all over the place and fled all over Europe. So Ludwig had his men go out, find him, and bring him here to Munich. And this is kind of where we're starting with this. So basically, Wagner manipulates Ludwig like a lot, especially politically, because Wagner was, and this is a big part, which we're gonna get to later in the historical part. He was a communist. Let's be very clear about it. He was a communist. He was later literally used for the opposite side, but he was from himself a communist. He was a Marxist. This was also like a great joke in the musical when they said, "What? Richard Wagner's here? You mean the communist? You mean the composer, don't you?" "Oh yeah, I meant composer, not communist, not communist." Like this was really fun. But he was a communist. Let's be very clear about this. And so he had these far left issues, which also unfortunately entailed anti-Semitism, because anti-Semitism is not something that only the far right do, but also the far left do. It's like a horseshoe, basically. Like this is the middle, and this is far left, and this is far right. So they are much closer to each other than to the middle, really. So he was unfortunately an anti-Semite. But I'm again getting off the rail. So anyway, mainly this was not about political issues about Wagner. So it was primarily him manipulating Ludwig into saying, so you should spend more on me, you should spend more on the arts, you should spend more on music, this and that and this and that. And this was the primary thing. You like heard now, Hans von Bülow was kind of his best friend. And he had a really beautiful wife. And I think from now on you know where I'm going with this. Because Wagner, of course, began an affair with her. So she officially had 5 children in her marriage to the other guy. But it was just 2, let's be honest. It was 2 with Hans von Bülow and 3 with Richard Wagner, who were called Eva, Isolde, and Siegfried, which are all names out of his works. So, should have told us something, especially when like the other children have French names like Daniela or something, or Danielle or something. So, should have told us something. Anyway, they had this affair. Basically, everyone in Munich knew about this. Everyone. The only one who didn't know was Ludwig. And they wanted him to write a letter to the Bavarians, specifically to the Munich people. So to say, they don't have an affair. They're just really good friends. You shouldn't say this anymore. And of course, when Ludwig eventually found out, and this is the last time we see Wagner and Cosima and Hans von Bülow on stage, when Ludwig eventually finds out, then he is absolutely furious. Because of course he still loves Wagner for what he did and for his music, and he still funds him, obviously. He gives him a lot of money to be able to build that festival house in Bayreuth. But on a personal level, their relationship is completely destroyed. So this was basically the main part, and it was kind of funny because they were like, you know, when you get out of compromising position, I would know about this, but when you come out of a compromising position, like the clothes were not so good, the trousers were a bit off, the hair was tousled, and in that stage they were like brought on stage to see the king, and he was like so furious because he himself had kind of a life like a monk. He didn't really have relationships. Obviously he never married. The one engagement he had, he broke. So it wasn't really that he had anything with anyone, basically, and that his good friend, whom he believed he was on one level with, now had this extramarital affair with this great woman. Ludwig was just, I don't know, maybe he was also repulsed in a way. But anyway, it was really funny. And like, okay, we have to now address the historical issues, okay? And as I said, if you get triggered by that, then please now cut it off. You have been warned. So we're gonna like go on now. So historically, it is more or less confirmed that Ludwig originally was gay, which of course was horrible in the 19th century, because everyone hated gay people, and especially for someone who was so deeply Catholic like Ludwig was. This was a great burden for him. It shouldn't have been, because it's just love. But unfortunately, it was. And he like explicitly sent people of his away to doctors to say like, I'm gay, what can I do against it? And he put his body through extreme physical harm to get this curse, to get this illness, whatever, away from himself. And he was very hardly burdened by this just love. I don't think he and Wagner had a physical relationship, but yeah, just wanted to address it, because this is of course also something why he was so misunderstood, I think. And also, like, later in life, he died under mysterious circumstances. We still don't know why he died, because, like, the papers about his death are in... the family has them, and they don't open them or something, so they have them... I don't get to the point. Basically, no one can read them. It's like the Diddy papers or the Epstein papers, or you know what I mean. So basically, no one knows how he died. He could have just died because he drowned, because he was mad, because he wanted to flee, whatever. His doctor was with him originally, and by the way, if you like want, they're in the lake where he died, and they're still across, so maybe if you want, we can like go there and give him a few flowers into the lake or something, if you want to see where he died. It's not very spectacular, obviously. I've been there before, but basically we don't really know what his psychics were, or what he thought, or what he did, or maybe if he harmed himself too much in this process of not being gay anymore. So we don't really know what's going on. We do know that he had like a deformity in his brain that changed his personality. So like in the later stages, he would hit like his employees like so hard and so often that there were like no normal servants available anymore who would do this job, who would like serve the king, which is a big deal. But there was no one anymore who would do this, so it was the chevaux légers. For us in Bavaria, it's just chevaux légers, but it's based on a French word, so it was basically the horseback riders, because they were tough enough to get through this. They were the only ones who were able to serve him anymore. And he also had orgy-like stuff going on. especially in Linderhof, which is unfortunately in my favorite cabin in the park, based on the Valkyrie. So he had kind of orgies going on there. And he also, as I said, he had maybe a bit of a drug addiction, at least cannabis. He had a lot to eat in his lifetime, like 8-course meals. He was severely overweight. Let's just say it like this. And he's a very controversial figure if you actually read the history. I personally kind of pity him a bit, because he was so young and he was so in love with the arts, and this was never respected by anyone, just Wagner basically, but no one really understood him in that. And of course, again, just the thought that he riled himself up because he was gay is just horrible to think. I hope everyone is able to live and love freely, obviously. And it's just love, people. Just get over it. It's just love. But in the 19th century, and especially as a Catholic man, that was of course unacceptable, and he hated himself for it. And this almost makes me cry, because I think it's such a terrible thing if you hate yourself for something like that, for which you should just love, but you hate yourself for it. You hate yourself for loving. That's really horrible. So this was like the sad part of the history, and we're getting to a probably even sadder part, because now we're going to Sophie. And as I said, she had this love story, which was, by the way, confirmed physical. We know this because there were letters she wrote to him, and he wanted his heir to burn these letters, but they instead published the letters. So kind of like the Reynolds papers. No, pamphlet. So anyway, we know that they had a confirmed physical relationship. And yes, so basically after the engagement was broke by the king, obviously she couldn't just marry a photographer, because she was still a princess. She was a princess in Bavaria, not in Bavaria. She was a princess in Bavaria, and of course she had to marry. So she married I think the English equivalent is Duke. Not sure. So she married the Duke of Alençon after this, but she had 2 children, but she got really, really depressed about her whole situation, and they were so, I don't know, concerned. Is one allowed to call this concern? Because we wait a bit and you won't call it concern anymore. So out of concern, they got her to Munich back, and she fell in love with the doctor who was supposed to treat her for her depression. And he wanted to break his marriage, and she wanted to break her marriage, and they wanted both to divorce from their respective spouses to be together, which of course was a huge no-no. This is a very, very huge no-no, because everyone in this family had their kind of tragedies. Not tragedies, but Elisabeth, her sister, was always running around. She was almost never in Austria. She was in Greece, she was in Spain, she was basically anywhere but her own home. She didn't care about her family, she did not care about the crown. So this was one. Then the other sister of the 2 was called Marie, and she was the Queen of Italy, and she was found bathing nude, which of course again is a big no-no. So this whole family had stuff going on, let's say it like this. So now she was coming with divorce, and this was of course unacceptable, and so they separated her and the doctor. And by the way, this was also physical as far as I can say. And they separated her and kind of got her in a mind facility, if you know what I mean. And of course, these psychiatric facilities are nothing like they are today. And I think we've already all like read about the practices they do on the patients, and they basically did things to her to get this out of her system, this divorce thinking, and to get her to be true and loyal to her husband again. And so she was healed. And she was sent back to her husband. And after this, she never strove again. So, and this is not the end. Like, she had a really tragic life, and she kind of gets overwhelmed by like all her sister stories because they were much worse. I think also Marie was also later in a psychiatric facility. I'm not sure, but I think so. And Sophie ultimately died when they had like a market inside of their royal palace or something, and there was a cinematograph, obviously, the 19th century version, which began to burn. And she was obviously, as the Duchess, she was saved amongst one of the first, but she ran back inside to help people, and she was only discovered through her teeth, because obviously when you like have a fire, then there's not much remaining, and basically at the teeth you can say what body this is, which is absolutely horrible. So it might not even be her bones in her grave. So she died very tragically. She had a very tragic life, and they were made out, she and Edgar, her photographer, they were kind of made out as this funny couple almost, but it really wasn't, so to say. They really had a tragic life. Also Ludwig had a tragic life. It was genuinely all this, I don't know, marrying in between these great families. They kind of all were mad at some point. Let's be real. So now again, next trigger warning: if you're Jewish or don't want to hear about the First World War, about Hitler, anti-Semitism, and then please cut off now. This is like the last warning. Now we're going to talk about Wagner and about his wife. So, yes, wife, by the way. After they were like exiled from the palace and from Munich, not really exiled because they were still great friends, but like on a personal level it wasn't so good anymore. Cosima actually got Wagner to agree for her to divorce Hans von Bülow and to marry him. Wagner did not want this in the original because he had such a great conductor. And this is, of course, much more important than this woman's wish to have the father of her children in her life. Yeah. He was an egomaniac, let's be real about this. As I said, love him as a composer, hate him as a man. As I said, like the political views he had, if you read, he was a great friend and fan of Karl Marx. And if you ever read Karl Marx, like especially the talk about Jews, this is so horrible. It could as well be by Hitler. It's really, really, really horrible. So I can only condemn this, and I hope I use the right word, by the way, from my deepest heart, because this is just horrible. And we're gonna talk about this like when we're gonna talk about his works, because he generally like talked about the German light persona, and the Jewish knight figures, so to say, in his works. By the way, for all Jews out there, honestly, the Jewish knight figures are so much better. They have so much more fire, they have so much more personality, they are really, really much better than the others. At least from a female perspective. And we're gonna get to that when we have like Ortrud and Venus and Kundry against Eva and Elsa and Elizabeth. And just saying. So, and this is again getting so long. We are again over an hour. Anyway, so I have to be very cautious about the next thing I say, because obviously Cosima was madly in love with her husband, and she did everything she could to help him in any way, shape, or form. That's why she stayed so long married to her husband, even though she obviously wanted Richard. Anyway, and gotta be very, very careful, because she's a very controversial figure. So, she loved her husband very much, and I admire that in someone, that she loved him so much that she overlooked so many of his flaws, obviously. And after he died, he was like oiled in some way, in toxic oils. I don't know, don't ask me. And basically no one was able to see him after he died. But of course, Mrs. Madly in Love barged in, and they found her like sprawled over her dead husband's body, and she was knocked out. She was almost dead at this point. She survived him for almost 50 years. So when they began their affair, she was 26-year-old, which means just 2 years older than me, and he was 50. And if you get to this point in the video, then I want to hear you say 26 and 50? This is so gross. Please tell me. So I know that you've really watched this, and this is not just you clicked on it and you were like, no, this is not for me. Which is totally fine, by the way. So she survived him by almost 50 years. So she only died in 1930, on April 1st, 1930. So she's dead a bit more than 85 years by now. So she basically fought for the rights of her husband's works after he died, and especially fought against it being able to being brought on stage anywhere else but Bayreuth, and by people she was not okay with. Where we come back to Jews, because obviously, like, I think the rights to the works were like for 30 years after the death of the composer. So in 1902, immediately, like, New York said, we're gonna do this right now. And of course, I think it was even a Jewish conductor, and Cosima was livid. This was so not what she wanted, and I'm like, if he can do it, then he should. Come on. Who cares about what color or what beliefs or whatever you are? If you're good for the role, or if you're good for conducting this, then you should be able to do this. Anyway, unless it's very specific that someone has a specific like skin color. I watched like Beetlejuice listened to Beetlejuice this morning, and I think at one point it specifically states that Barbara and Adam are white. So would be kind of weird if they weren't. So if that's specifically in there, then it should be. But like in any other way, just let them do it. But Cosima was very adamant on not letting other people do her husband's works. And she failed, luckily, miserably. So basically she was the one who made Bayreuth the way it is today, because she had this vision of many politicians coming every year to celebrate her husband's works and to have it like this big prominent people thing going on. And also like normal people like me who can go there 1 or 2 times to just hear this phenomenal music, which I'm gonna do this summer. And even though this will probably be after like my university assignment is through, I'm still gonna take you because I really want to show you like the building, and again, get ready with me in like some gown or something. So this is what I'm definitely going to show you this. And this is actually a tradition that Cosima made with the politicians that is still today a thing. So even today, like the biggest composer, not the biggest composer, the biggest politicians and the prominent people are coming to Bayreuth every year to celebrate this. Even though one of the biggest fans, unfortunately, and I say really unfortunately, was Adolf Hitler. And Adolf Hitler was also one of the politicians at the time who came to Bayreuth. And he very famously had coffee or tea at the villa of the Wagners in Bayreuth with one of the Wagners, who was, by the way, not a Wagner by blood. She was a Wagner by marriage. She was an American. Let's be very clear about this. Winifred Wagner was an American. She was American, came here, and then drank tea or coffee with Hitler. And this basically gave Wagner this thought that he is far right, which he was not. He was far left. But basically, this is one of the things why Wagner is so controversial today, because he's very much associated with Hitler, and also because Hitler, unfortunately, like took one of the main sentences in one of his opera. You already know where we're going. Took this and made it for his own kind of signature sentence, which is Heil dem Führer. Hail to the, I don't know. This comes from Wagner. So this is basically one of the reasons why Wagner is so controversial politically today, because he's made out to be this far-right figure, even though he was a Marxist and he was a communist. And as I said, they unfortunately have like a really big history with anti-Semitism, with Hitler, with Marx. And I just want to be clear before we start this series next week, that I hate Wagner for that. I hate Wagner on a personal level because I think he's a manipulator, he's an anti-Semite, obviously, and he kind of destroyed his own reputation with his political beliefs, which I'm just thinking now is kind of what Rachel Zegler did with Snow White. She kind of destroyed the role with her political beliefs. So even though they're not as extreme most of the time as Wagner's was, we've got to be very clear that Wagner basically never had this extreme of an anti-Semitism as Hitler had, and I don't want to defend him in any way, shape or form, but this is just the thing. So Wagner has a big legacy today, as I said, being this controversial composer, but also like this the traditions that we have today with Bayreuth are mainly because of Cosima. So yeah, that's, I think, basically it. Yeah, I'm sorry that we had to like end on this note. I don't know if you like stuck around until here, then congratulations. I know it has been hard. You deserve a medal for this. And tell me like I've made a video of the bows at the end of the musical. So if you want to see them, then write me down in the comments below. And like, I'll show you the mixture of hoop skirts and Jane Austen. Wait a second. Like this cut. By the way, tell me if you know what this musical is. You should. Anyway, so this is basically it. I'm very sorry that we had to end on this kind of horrible historical note, and also again on these very sad notes. But I also think that, especially with historical musicals, we should be very aware of what they show us and what they don't show us. Because obviously Sophie and Edgar were out to be made the comedic couple. If you like, go to your YouTube music, you'll find the Paradies polka. So that's what they sing. They are made out to be the comedic couple, but they are not really. The only one who's remotely had this sad and tragic story is Ludwig. And in the original, as my parents told me, they have they have a lake on stage originally, because obviously they have another musical about Ludwig, so they do have to have that lake because he dies in it. So they would have that originally. And in the very original of 25 years ago, yes, 25 years ago, it was that Ludwig sang his last song and then he went into the lake until he like vanished. Which of course is nothing like this, is not historically accurate, because his doctor was with him and they both died. But in this case it was just him, like they had different levels of the stage, and so he went up and then there was a blue backdrop and he went down and he was out of sight. But he was really the only like tragic story. But yeah, and I think this musical is so beautiful. It's really wonderful and beautiful and tragic, and if it is supposed to be this, I don't know when reality starts and dreams end, if it's supposed to be like this, then it's wonderfully made, and I really hope they pick this up and they make this a regular again with better costumes and maybe a better backdrop or something. And I really hope that they will do this because it's simply beautiful, and I hope they will have a proper CD, because there was also another wonderful musical piece which is not like on the track list, that's on YouTube Music and Spotify and something, and I hope they like make a CD or something out of this. So if you wanna listen to it, I'll have a link in the comment below. If you wanna see like the short video that I made, I might not remember all the characters' names, by the way. Not everyone, like just the secretary of the ministers or something. So bit weird. I may not know all of them, so I'm sorry of that in advance if you want to see it. And if you want to have a specific series for me to talk about, and I have seen it, obviously, then yeah, just write to me. I would love to hear from you, because, well, I know personally I hardly comment on anyone. I mostly only comment on Mr. Thomas English's channel, because he actually reads them and he like makes little hearts and something if he likes something. So basically, by the way, this is another one of the reasons why I watched Snow White, because Rachel Zegler was really nice to Mr. Thomas English, like when he was at the premiere of the movie. I mean, it could also be just like a Miranda Priestley moment where like someone said he's singing in a costume of Ursula on the internet, and then she went up to him and congratulated him. But anyway, she seemed very nice in that moment, and this also tells me that not every person is completely bad and not even every person is completely good, and maybe she learned something from this. I don't think she should hide her opinions because of that, but I'm sorry, it was the biggest part why this movie was destroyed for me. Also, they like do Tangled on hold. Like, have they seen my video? Do they want me to contact me to like grow my hair out or something? No. Still too old for this role. Anyway, they are putting this on hold, and I think it might be good, honestly, to like maybe listen to the fans more and to have someone out of the German culture, or someone who at least understands German culture, unlike Rachel. But anyway, so this is basically it. I would love to hear from you, and yeah, I'm sorry this took so long yet again. So please comment a green heart if you watched the whole thing through. Thanks so much. Bye. Have a nice day.